Hey, what's up guys? My name is Stephen Mayeux, and in this video I'm in the great outdoors because I want to shake things up a little bit and make this video a little different from all the rest of them. Speaking of which, if you haven't already checked me out on YouTube, I have a ton of videos. I have 3 playlists already. One of them, I go through all of the algorithm challenges at freecodecamp.com, and I walk you through from start to finish and explain, my thought process and how I solved each problem. There's about 50 of them, so check it out. I also did one of the projects for the front-end certificate at freecodecamp.com, the random quote machine, and also a project for the back-end certificate. And in this video, well, it's actually a follow-up to this random quote machine series that I did a couple of months ago. A viewer, his name is Sean, really nice guy, he reached out to me and he wanted to know more about like what was happening under the hood. He really liked it, and he was able to use my code to build his project, but he didn't feel comfortable submitting it to FreeCodeCamp and to take credit for it because he didn't really understand exactly what was happening with the code, particularly making AJAX requests and understanding what an API and what JSON is. So, Sean, that's a great attitude to have. You certainly don't want to just copy and paste code without understanding what it is. And that's the subject of this video. It's going to be one video. I'm going to walk through several topics really quickly, but not too much typing and coding for this one, just sort of a miscellaneous one-off video because I want to answer your questions. By the way, if you have any questions, or if you want me to if you want to watch me build one, project from start to finish, just let me know. You can always contact me through YouTube by leaving a comment. You can also just email me, stephenmayeux@gmail.com. Would love to read your emails. And anyway, yeah, comments and questions from you guys makes my channel so much better. Okay, so a couple of things here. So his question was, Sean, going back to his question, he wanted to know what AJAX is, what JSON is, and what jQuery does. How does jQuery get involved with any of that stuff? Because we used AJAX and jQuery and JSON data for that random quote machine video. All right, let's back up and let's think about what happens when we visit a website. If I go to a website, okay, for example, if I go to google.com and I press the enter button, my computer is making a request to the server. Okay, it's somewhere in the world, and it's hosting all these files and HTML and all this great stuff. The server, it receives my requests, and it does something to that, depending on the type of request and depending on certain factors, whether or not I'm authorized, signed in, signed out, and then the server will respond and give me some status code. It will give me some sort of a file, and usually when we go to websites, it gives us an HTML document. So I'm going to show you this happening in action. I'm going to go to my Chrome Developer Tools, which is amazing, by the way, and I can create a video course just on the Dev Tools alone. I'm going to go to Developer and Developer Tools. All right, and there's a lot of different options. First of all, you can look at the elements, all of the DOM elements that are on the page. This is your JavaScript console, but what I'm really interested in is the network. Okay, we're going to see all of the different types of requests that my computer is making whenever I go to google.com. So I'm going to refresh the page, and look at that. That's a lot of requests just for this simple Google page. Well, at the very top, we get the main page. All right, this is the request URL, google.com. It is a GET request. Okay, and there's many different types of verbs. We'll get into that in a moment. The request and response was successful. It gave me a status code of 200, which means, okay, everything worked as expected. And we get some header data from the response, and this is a text HTML document. It tells me when the response was sent and a whole bunch of other stuff. So that's basically how the internet works. You send a request to a server. Depending on the type of request and what information you sent it, that spits out some response to you, and it's usually HTML if you are just visiting a website. In turn, that HTML document, it probably has some images and CSS files, some JavaScript files, maybe something like Bootstrap or jQuery embedded in the HTML document. So in turn, we get this response of the HTML document, and that HTML document, it actually goes out and it requests different resources. So you're usually going to get like many different things in this network tab when you visit a website. And you can see it happen in real time, and you can see like the timeline of what gets loaded when. Really useful, useful tool here. Now, that's what happens when we normally go to a website. We make a request, the response is HTML. That HTML document will probably reach out and request other resources. Now, as developers, we're not always interested in accessing, like an entire website in HTML. Many times, we just want, just some raw data from the server, from the database. And usually when you're building applications, web applications in JavaScript, you're going to deal a lot with JSON or JSON data. That's JSON, J-S-O-N. It stands for JavaScript Object Notation. And let's take a look what that looks like. All right, so for that random quote machine project that I built, it's on my YouTube playlist, and it's also right here on GitHub. I'll bring you back to the page later. I have all the code and some notes about it. Anyway, for this project, I use the Forestmatic API. And API, I believe that stands for like Application Program Interface. Basically, an API, that's a way for a developer like me to wire and hook up to another website's resources. So I want the data, I want the quotations and expressions from Forestmatic because they have a huge database of that and lots of great stuff. So I am going to use their API endpoint. And an API endpoint, it's just a web address. It's a URL, just like google.com or Facebook or twitter.com, whatever. But instead of returning HTML to us, instead of the server responding with HTML, it responds with different kinds of information. And in this case, with the Forestmatic API, I'm going to blow this up right here. It can, of course, respond with JSON. That's what we want for our JavaScript applications. And JSON-P, which we'll get to in a little bit. It can also respond with HTML, text, XML. Every API is a little different. So when you are going to use an API, really good idea to read their documentation, see the examples, and see the different options that you have. But every API is different. This is just the Forestmatic API. So to use it, it's really quite simple. We take the root URL for this API, which I'm copying and pasting right here. And if we read the documentation, it's telling us that we need to include this method. We have to give it a format. I think the default format is XML. We don't want that, so we should specify JSON and a few other parameters that we have to give it. So I'm just going to save us some time, and I'm going to copy and paste that, which is everything that we need, but I don't want XML. I want JSON. So I'm going to put that in there. Whoops, that didn't work. Okay, let me try this one more time. I always screw this up. Okay, and oh, I think it auto-completed it for me. Let's see here. I forgot to put the question mark. All right, so we need a question mark and then all of this good stuff there. And when I go to it, I don't get a website, but I get this funny looking stuff. That's JSON. Basically, it looks like an object. So, you know, in JavaScript, you have these objects with the curly braces. Then you have these keys or the properties, followed by a colon, and then some sort of, you know, data in here. So basically, we have a bunch of strings. And I can, you know, reload it, and I should get, oops, I got some sort of error here. I should get, you know, other quotations, just, yeah, random quotations. And that's what's happening essentially. I'm making a request to this URL or this API endpoint to the Forestmatic server, and instead of returning with a web page, I told it to respond with JSON, and that's what I have. To give you another example, I've got this application. I made this for a job. I made this for a job interview, actually. It's built with React and Redux. It's really cool. Basically, you can sign up and you can create an account and you can view other people's accounts. That's just a joke one that I created for test purposes. But all of these accounts are being displayed and it's dynamic. I'm not hard coding any of these names in. These names are getting fetched from a database, and it works the same way, just like this Forestmatic API. So when this page loads, it's fetching, or it's making a GET request to my server that hosts all of these profiles, and then my server has been configured to respond with this profile information. So if you go to it, this is all of the profile information. And it is an array of objects. Now, right now what you see the JSON data, but it looks really, really good. And normally out the box, it's not going to look that good. I'm going to go to my extensions and show you what I mean. I'm going to disable this extension called JSON View. I'm going to go back and let me reload. And oh my God, that's really ugly. Okay, it's just a big blob of text. Really hard to parse that just on my own. So that's not good. If you're working with APIs, making web applications, you absolutely need some sort of extension like this. So go ahead, add it. I use one called JSON View. I'm sure there's like dozens of others. And it just makes it so much easier to parse and read and to understand. I can collapse it. And that's very useful. Now I know the response from the server is going to be an array of objects, whereas this one from Forestmatic, it's just a single object. So that helps us develop our application, and we know what to do with a response. Okay, so basically, that's one thing I wanted to show you. Another tool that's really, really cool is this guy here. It's called Postman. It's a Chrome app, so you just have to go to the Chrome store, or the Chrome App Store. You just click that button, App, and you can add apps here. It's really, really easy. So search for this one. It's called Postman, and you can essentially do the same thing. You can make your GET and post requests and other HTTP requests without the browser, which makes it really, really powerful. So, for example, if I wanted to get that list of profiles that I had before, okay, I would just go to the API endpoint. Here it is. It's sandbox.authserver.herokuapp.com/profiles. I get that, and I get the same sort of response. But Postman is even better because I can actually submit other types of requests. Whenever I visit a website, or usually if I'm using an API of some sort, it's a GET request. But there's many other kinds of requests. Like, for example, if I sign up or sign in to my account, that's a POST request to a server. And if you delete your account or delete some other data, well, that's a DELETE request. If you update some information, existing information, that's a put or a patch request. So many different requests that are available to us. Let's go ahead and let's create a post request using Postman. So I'm going to select Post from the drop-down menu. And this is the API endpoint for that application that I built. It's /signup. And I just have to give it some information. So let's give it the, we have to give it some JSON information. So use double quotes for the properties and keys. Let's give it a name. And let's say Evil Steven. Is that a T? Evil Steven. Let's say test 1 and a password of 123. Okay. So there's the post, there's the API endpoint, there's the information. And by the way, this information, it would essentially just come from the, where is it? From the sign up form. That's basically what I'm sending the server. I'm sending them a name, an email, and a password. Okay, so if I post this to the API, what happens? Ooh, bad request. Uh-oh. Bad request. Oh, maybe I already registered this one. Oh, I know what it is. I forgot the comma. All right, let's try it again. Okay, cool. So when a user signs up on this website, okay, they get this user object, and that's what gets saved to my database. And I also get a token. This is a JSON web token. Really cool way to authenticate and authorize users. Anyway, that's beyond the scope of this video, but that's the response that I get from the server when a new user signs up. And I bet if we go back to that website, look at that, Evil Steven. All right, he's available on the website, and I didn't go through the form. I just used the Postman to essentially recreate the same type of request. Okay, so there's one more thing that I want to go over, and this is the topic of security, browser security. I'm going to go to my code pen here. Where's my code pen? All right, this is where I made my random quote machine. And you see in here, I use the AJAX method. This is available in jQuery, and it's a way to make HTTP requests. You don't need jQuery to do that, obviously. You can use vanilla JavaScript. Angular has a way of making these requests. You can do it in React. It's kind of built in, but to many different tools. But it's really easy to do in jQuery. So essentially, this AJAX method, it takes an object as an argument, and you need to configure it. You got to give it the URL and the API endpoint. You got to give it basically some parameters if that's required. And then there's this success property on the object, and this is a method, it's a function. And basically the response that we get from the server, that's that variable right here, API response, and then I can inject that into the DOM or do whatever I want with it. But if I take out this, and it's kind of hard to see because I'm outside and can't really see too well in the sun. I thought this would be great for the video, but maybe not. My computer is getting hot too, so I should end this really soon. All right, if I go ahead and open up my console, okay, and I'm going to basically save this. All right, and I get this. It says XML HTTP request cannot load. No access control allow origin header is present. All right, so you might get this error sometimes when you're building different web applications that rely on APIs, and this is known as a CORS error, C-O-R-S. That stands for cross-origin, resource sharing. So my website is here on codepen.io, and that is one origin. Okay, it's one domain, codepen.io. And I have a JavaScript file, stupid fly, stupid nature. I have a JavaScript file that is making a request to another server, another domain somewhere. Well, that is gonna, produce this error. Normally, an HTML document, it will go out and fetch different resources. It might fetch images that's hosted on another server or on Amazon Web Services. It might fetch your Bootstrap and jQuery files from a CDN or Bootstrap or other CSS files. And that is an example of one domain requesting resources from other domains. And that's totally cool if an HTML document makes the request. But if a script, okay, in other words, if a JavaScript file or some inline JavaScript in an HTML document, if it makes a request to some resource, to some endpoint on another domain, then you get this error. And there's different ways to get around that. If the API is configured to accept requests without this access control allow origin, then okay, it'll respond to your browser, no problem. But in CodePen, it's notoriously difficult. So you just need to specify, at least for this Forestmatic, not to use JSON, but to use JSON-P. And JSON-P, that's just a workaround, kind of like this CORS issue. So anyway, just keep that in mind. If you ever see this error in your console with working with an API, then that's probably it. Your application, the JavaScript file, it's on one domain, but it's making a request to another domain. And depending on how things are configured on that server, it may not work. So just read the documentation, Google, go to Stack Overflow. People have had these issues before, but usually for good APIs, the documentation's great, and so it shouldn't be any problem with this. It sometimes happens though. Okay, so that's all the time that I have for this video. It's getting freaking hot out here, which is unusual in Maine in October, but I'm going to go back in where it's cooler. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions for improvement, please let me know. You can leave a comment below. You can always find me on GitHub. You can go to my GitHub profile. Let me go back. There it is, github.com/Stephen Mayeux. And all of my other information's down here too. You can go to my personal website or send me an email. That's all very cool. I love questions and I love interacting with my viewers. Have a great day. Happy coding, or have a great night if you're watching this at nighttime. Happy coding, and I will see you in my next video. Bye-bye for now. Bye-bye.